Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cinema Safari. Today we're going to be talking about The Naked Gun. Now, The Naked Gun opened this past weekend. It came in third place in its opening weekend, behind The Bad Guys 2 and then Fantastic Four, still in the number one spot. The Naked Gun stars Liam Neeson, who is playing Lieutenant Frank Drebin Jr., who is the son of the original Frank Drebin from the original films. Then you also have Pamela Anderson, Paul Walter Hauser, Danny Huston, Cece Pounder, Kevin Durand, Lisa Kozhy, Cody Rhodes, Booster Rhymes. Overall, a great cast. We also have Michael here today, and I think that my initial thoughts of the film, I really liked it. I thought Liam Neeson, also with a lot of people that I've talked to have seen it, pretty much everyone agrees he did great in the role, perfect casting. The way he played the character was really good, very similar to the original, which a lot of people thought was very positive for the film.
I've heard it got okay reviews. I can tell you from the clips that I've seen online and the trailer, it was going to be a hard pass for me. I did not find the jokes to be overly funny on the clips that I saw. The fact that the original creators of it were not involved in any way, shape, or form was kind of a bummer. Seeing as how it's their creation, and they actually had a script that I guess Paramount decided never to move forward with. I like Liam Neeson. I think he's a terrific actor, and I've seen skits with him in comedy, and I know he can pull it off. It was the same thing with when he took over Hannibal Smith for the A-Team, and that movie, unfortunately, was an epic failure. Had such high hopes for that, as I did for this, and I can tell you now, I won't go see it in the theater. I'll wait till it comes out on one of those free services to see. One night when there's nothing else to watch, maybe I'll watch it. But yeah, I gotta say that I like the idea, the premise. They're all sons of the previous characters, and that I like that idea. But it just, I didn't laugh in any of the trailers. None of the trailers. Didn't laugh. Thought the jokes were lame that I saw in the trailer. It felt like they were trying way too hard for the jokes, compared to the original where it just flew so naturally. I'm sure there's a bunch of sight gags in the film. At least I hope there are, because that's the trademark of the Naked Gun and the Zuckers is the visual gags, right? Not just the audio, not just the verbal jokes. I'm sure there's a ton of. I hope there's a ton of visual gags that help, but at least in the few clips that I saw online, yeah, and paying homage to Siskel and Ebert would be a thumbs down for me.
Yeah. I never saw the original film, so I didn't really have anything to base off of when I saw it. There definitely were, and I don't know how it would compare to like the original films, but I think there definitely were like some gag comedy moments. But it's also like a very specific type of comedy, especially the kind of character that Liam Neeson was playing, because it's kind of a deadpan comedy.
Oh,
In a way,
sure,
'cause
yeah,
not
that's how the
he's
original
being
was.
serious, but it comes across or is meant
And
to come across as comedy.
yeah, and that's exactly how Leslie Nielsen played the character. Leslie Nielsen, he played it like he was a serious police officer, but there was an air of comedy in his portrayal. I mean, it was deadpan. He could say these lines with a straight face and believe that. Frank Drebin doesn't believe. Frank Drebin believes he's like the best cop in the world, and he's out there and he's running amok, and everybody else sees his shenanigans, but he doesn't. So that's what the original was, and that was the charm of the original. You had Leslie Nielsen, who was a serious actor until he got cast in Airplane, and then now he's the most famous comedy actor. But again, the Zucker brothers who created the original, and Naked Gun was based off of a TV show called The Police Squad, and that series was the same thing. He delivered that deadpan humor, and everybody else would respond to him, and he was oblivious to it. That's what made the film so fun, and there were so many different sight gags and visual gags and things to, you had to watch the movie many, many times to pick up everything, because just like the movie Airplane, you can't, if you watch it once, you'll never see everything that's in there, and every time you watch it, you find something else. You're like, oh, you laugh at a new joke that you didn't see the first, 40 times you saw it. So that's what the beauty of the Naked Gun was. And like I said, I was hoping for that. It's hard to capture that, especially when you don't have the original people involved, and I would understand if they're no longer around or didn't want it, but they're around and they're available. So why not, utilize them, because they'll make it funny. And I said, like I said, watching, the trailer, he the sight gag of him wearing the heart underwear, in the bank. That was an example of like a sight gag that you would have seen in the original. But even that was just kind of lame, I thought. And then, he's disguised as a little girl and then pulls it off. I'm like, okay, all right. But, Frank Drebin wasn't a, he accomplished his goals by accident, not through skill. And it looked like Liam Neeson had the skill, like, from Taken. He's going to go into the bank and he's going to... Yeah, Frank Drebin wouldn't go into the bank and he would shoot, and, the bullets would go everywhere, but they're not... would miss the target, but would end up hitting a chandelier or something, and the guy would die because something fell on him, haphazardly. That was the beauty of it. But I saw in this movie, it's like Liam Neeson's playing Taken, but a comedy of Taken. You know what I mean? That's the kind of vibe that I got from it, which is, it didn't seem to me like a true comedy. I don't mind Pamela Anderson as the female muse. They had Priscilla Presley in the originals. I wasn't a fan of hers, but she didn't detract from the movie. You know what I mean? She didn't make it any worse. And I think Pamela Anderson, has gotten better as she's gotten older. A long way from Tommy Lee's sex tape and Baywatch. I think she was even nominated for an award or something, for one of the movies she did when she played the Showgirl, right? Last year or something.
Yeah, the last Showgirl, yeah.
Yeah, so, listen, I think it's fantastic that they casted her in it. But like I said, based on the 3 or 4 minutes of footage I saw, I was like, yeah, no. I was disappointed. I got to say, deeply disappointed. But to reboot some of these franchises, like we talked about last time, is very difficult. You capture lightning in a bottle once; it's hard to do it twice. And it was interesting because I was watching a clip today of Christopher Reeve, who was done on a talk show, and he said Hollywood suffers from sequelitis, where they want to dump so much money because they struck gold, and he says, they're only concerned, they make all these promises above the line and then never deliver the stuff below the line, and it's a sliding slope, and they never do as well because they don't put the time and the effort in below the line to make the movie good. And he was spot on, and I think that is so true in today's industry.
Bouncing off that point, I know the latest Pixar movie, Elio, that came out, a lot of people were... Well, Disney said that after it had a poor box office run, Disney and Pixar, they put on social media, they were like, um, everyone wants original movies, yet they don't go to see them. And I thought that was interesting because, yes, Hollywood does rely largely on sequels, remakes, reboots, but it's not. I don't agree with them when they say we're not interested in originals because we are. It's just I, partially for that movie specifically, they didn't market it well, and I think part of that reason was because as it got closer to release, they knew it wasn't going to do well. And I didn't watch it, but I did hear like from some people who did watch it that they liked it. So there's definitely a lot going to it that contributes to if an original movie can succeed because they can definitely still succeed, and we still do want to see original movies. They just have to be good movies.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, like I know we talked about this last time, and it says there's a lack of creativity, and you know, listen, these movies were all new when they came out in the '80s and then the '90s, right? They were the brainchild of somebody, and people latched on. Yes, so if you're trying to market to those people who are now, you know, in their 40s or 50s or 60s or later, um, you, yeah, you're going to have a market, and hopefully that you'll introduce a newer market. But Ghostbusters is an example of a franchise that's got the staying power. You know, aside, I don't want to use the comic book movies because that's a whole other. But if you look at other movies and IP that are out there, Karate Kid, another one, right? You had the new movie with both Ralph Macchio and Jackie Chan. But look what they did with Cobra Kai, that TV series. It was very popular. It kind of got a little wonky towards the end, but it started off really strong because they did it right. They continued the story. So those franchise, even Terminator, still you got tons of fans that'll. And now with the rise of AI and robots, it's more prevalent today. So yes, the newer Terminators probably not so much. I know they're talking about doing a Lethal Weapon sequel that Mel Gibson's going to direct. Have high hopes for that? Yeah, possibly. It could work, but you need some new, fresh ideas, right? Come up with a new movie. Yeah, a lot of them aren't going to. You're going to have a lot of misses. That's just I think the problem is that there's so much out there now with Netflix and Amazon and all these streaming services that people are not necessarily needing to go to the movies, right? Look, John Wick. John Wick was a fresh take, and that franchise. And then they tried with Ballerina, and unfortunately, that movie was a massive miss, right? And I think the movie just had no direction and it had no character, right? It was just an amalgamation of just blah, and had to be reshot, But back in when those movies came out, that was it. You want to go on a Friday night, these are the movies that are out there. You got to pick one because there wasn't anything on TV and you didn't have the streaming. But now you can sit at home and watch your favorite movies and TV shows from yesteryear and not worry about going out and paying $20 for a movie ticket. Look, Top Gun did well. They're talking about making a third one. So if they do it right, they can. But you need, instead of making all these sequels, come up with a new idea. There's plenty of scripts out there but studios don't want to take the risk because it comes down to dollars and cents, and they're in the business to make money, so they're going to stick with what works, and then they oversaturate it, and then you get those superhero movies, those comic book movies, which people get sick of, that don't do well. And then you get the same recycled cast of characters, right? Robert Downey Jr. is now playing Doctor Doom. Oh, okay, fine. Everybody's going to go there and see Iron Man on the screen. Yeah, and not taking anything from Robert Downey Jr. He's a terrific actor, and I'm sure he's going to do well. But you're sitting in there and you're like, oh, that's Iron Man. You can't tell me that a majority of the people that are going to see this movie are not going to think, oh, look, Iron Man's playing a bad guy. And kids, why is Iron Man playing a bad guy? Right?
Yeah.
But I'm glad that at least they're making a movie about a villain as opposed to making another Superman or the 18th Batman. Like, come on. You mean to tell me there's no other characters like we talked about last time? Find another character. Batman and Superman have been done. Make an Aquaman movie. Try it again because Jason Momoa was not. Those movies were not good. I didn't think. I don't know what your opinion is on that, but I didn't think they were that good. Just try to make, I don't know. I just think there's a lack of creativity in Hollywood, and the studios are gun shy to pull the trigger on an original movie because I just don't know that the audiences have the appetite for it. But they kind of do on the streaming services, right? Because you get all these different streaming TV shows that, hit it. So why can't you do the same thing with a movie? But I think all in all, it's because of the streaming services.
They're more concerned with, like, for theatrical releases at least, they're more concerned with, like, what's going to make the most money at the box office. And I think with, like, streaming movies, I don't really know what goes into, like, how, like, making money off streaming, how all that works. But I feel like with theatrical releases, the sequels, franchises tend to do better, and they want to see something that's going to make like the biggest box office run, so they get more money, rather than a comedy like Naked Gun or
right.
Anything like this isn't necessarily going to be as big. But I also know Naked Gun, it went through like 4 or 5 script rewrites from when it was first like in development in like the early 2000s when they planned to do it. And I think originally the original writer or one of the like people that worked on the originals was involved with it, but then it went through so many different drafts.
He had a script. He had a script that they gave to Paramount, and Paramount said no, they passed, and they decided to go in a different direction, which somebody I don't know. I mean, the studio system is it's a complex. It's politics. It's dollars and cents. It's not entertainment. It's a business, right? Just like professional sports isn't entertainment. It's a business.
Yeah.
And if you're not making money, but to me, if you're going to revisit something, you should at least be true to the original, and at least if the creator there, like for instance, Mel Brooks has greenlit Spaceballs, the sequel, but he's not writing it. He's going to star in it, but I don't know that he's actually going to be writing a lot of it. Josh Gad is leading the helm, and Josh Gad, I'm sorry, is just not funny. And he proved that with his disaster of a sequel with History of the World Part 2, which was just god-awful. I mean, I watched the first episode. It was a half-hour episode. And I got halfway through the second, and I turned it off. I'm like, this is just garbage. It wasn't funny. It was just, they were trying to appease too many of the woke, and they weren't hitting jokes. Those jokes, his humor, you can't use that humor today because people get offended by it. And then stay home and don't watch it. It's funny, And I think that's one of the problems we have is, everybody tries to stay between the lines and doesn't want to color outside the lines in fear of being canceled or, bad press or whatever. But it's humor. And if you can't understand that it's a joke and it's not intentional or malicious, then don't see the movie. Keep your mouth shut and go about your business and watch whatever you want to watch. But I think artists are afraid to be that bold in today's day and age. Like Blazing Saddles would never get made.
The world is so sensitive nowadays. So I think a lot of the comedies, like the original Naked Gun, other comedies from like the 90s that are getting remade today, the creators are have to modernize it because a lot of like even Rush Hour, which I think I said last time, when it they play it on TV now, they put a disclaimer before it because
Yeah,
of the content. So like,
and that's a funny
it
movie.
won't be lit right now.
I know. I got to see Chris Tucker do his stand up. By the way, he was not that funny, which was heartbreaking. But he did talk about Rush Hour a little bit, and he talked about Michael Jackson, and but he just wasn't as funny as I had hoped that he would be. A lot of that movie was improvised. Jackie Chan tells the story that the first time they met, Chris did all the talking, and Chris left the meeting, and Jackie didn't say a word, and he thought he's because he didn't understand English, and it was no, he's because you didn't shut up. I couldn't get a word in.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, he even talks about like that movie today would not be made today. He's like, there's just no way. He's like, people have lost their sensibilities. Like you said, they're too sensitive. Comedy is comedy. You don't like it, stay home. Don't go. And when you go to a comedy show, expect to be hit with jokes that are going to be off color. They're going, a good comedian's going to, attack everybody, race, religion, sex, whatever, right? It doesn't matter. Yeah, there are going to be some off-color jokes that may strike a little close, but they're not. I don't necessarily believe that any of it's malicious, right? They're trying to get a laugh. Now, you look at comedy from years ago, like the likes of Robin Williams and George Carlin and Rodney Dangerfield, and those stand-up guys, they didn't need uh, to go that far, into the obscene to get a laugh. They could get a laugh just. Then you had comics like Andrew Dice Clay who took it all the way to the other side and was as vulgar as one could get. And in the '80s, he was huge. He was as big as Robin Williams was. He'd be canceled today for what he said. But for me, a good comedian doesn't need to tell a hurtful joke. You should be able to. There's enough material where you can make people laugh without attacking race, sex. You know, yeah, some of them. Sometimes you wade into those waters. But again, if you're at a comedy show, what do you expect? You expect to laugh, and if you're going to take it personally, then don't go to the show. I mean, it's like I just don't understand. You're going to make a big stink about somebody making a joke or saying something. If it bothers you, then don't watch it. Why ruin it for the rest of the people that want to be there? And I think that's just the selfishness of society today.
Yeah, I agree. It's disappointing because a lot of the great comedy movies and shows from that time period wouldn't get made today, and I think like some horror movies and the kind of content we get in those movies
Oh yeah,
that people watch is basically the same thing. Because some of them are so grotesque and like just so for
the Saw
mature
movies,
audiences.
Hostel.
So that can definitely relate to comedy as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, some of those movies would never get made. I know that I believe there's a new Friday the 13th coming out. There's a new horror Bambi movie coming out. Yeah, there was the Winnie the Pooh horror movie, which I started to watch and turned off because it was boring. Never really got into. I kind of like fell asleep. I'm like, it just took too long to get anywhere. But because that IP is now available, a lot of the copyrights are starting to expire on a lot of the Disney stuff. There's fair game now, so you're seeing these, off-color remakes in horror. But yeah, I mean, look, they did I Know What You Did Last Summer sequel, right? The Scream sequel. I think with Halloween, they did. I'm sure they'll in another couple years there'll be another take on those movies they're going to constantly remake them, right? It's the same story. You're just going to tell it maybe in a different perspective, and the kills are going to be different, or they're going to be bigger, or whatever, right? But you know, people love that stuff. It's horror. How many times has Freddy Krueger been killed, but he comes back? Michael Myers has been burned, and Jason Voorhees drowned. But they come back because we believe, and we want to believe, that they're indestructible, right? And we love it. But the movie, I think it's the attention span of today's viewing public that can't hold. When you're watching 30-second clips on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or whatever, you don't have the patience to sit through a 90-minute movie. Kids today don't. They want to be on their phones. Nobody wants to sit and watch a 90-minute movie, which is a shame. And going back to the comedy, you don't even see decent comedies on TV anymore, right? On the network shows. I can't think of a single comedy on TV right now that's worthy of being called a comedy that I would watch. Big Bang Theory was probably the last decent one that went off the air. You're not going to see those comedies anymore today. I just don't think they're like you said, they're pandering to the wrong audience, and they're afraid to push boundaries, and there's no creativity. What's funny? That's why a lot of these shows don't last on network TV, because nobody's watching them. And the streaming services tend to stay away from the comedies too, from a series perspective, right? They're all more towards the dramas. But we need a good comedy. I think the people.
It's been so long since we've had a good comedy movie
Yeah.
or two, and from what you said earlier, I feel like if they just went ahead, made a comedy, didn't hold back anything. If people want to watch it, they're going to watch it. If you watch it, don't like it, that's fine. But if it's
Right.
not a cup of tea, don't watch it. But, it should still be made. Because there is a target audience out there that will appreciate those types of movies.
Yeah, you're right. There is no, you're not going to get those target audiences anymore, right? Because you're just not. It's not happening, right? People don't gather around the TV and watch TV anymore. They watch it on their phones or on their laptops. So the days, the Nielsen ratings, and now everything's DVR playback because nobody wants to watch the commercials, so everybody records it and fast forwards it. Or they go to Netflix, and and if you get it for free, a lot of people will take it for free. And when the commercials go on, they're on their phones and they're back. They're not paying attention. So it's a whole different system now. Back in the day, you could measure who's watching, and you were that coveted, 18 to 40 male was the coveted block that you were hoping to win. And now, it's still that coveted block, but now I think the way they measure everything now is totally different. And perfect example, the TV show Fubar that starred Arnold Schwarzenegger on Netflix.
I heard it just got canceled.
Yeah, so the first season, it was like True Lies, but on TV. And the first season was great. It was charming. It was witty. It was funny. They had the action. Arnold did a great job. Monica Barbaro, she was great. They had a supporting cast, characters. It was an enjoyable show. Then the show this year was absolutely awful. I suffered through all 8 episodes because I was vested in it. I was hoping it'd get better. The jokes were they tried so hard, and they set them up that you saw them coming a mile away. It wasn't natural. It was very 30 seconds, time to insert the joke. You could see Arnold Schwarzenegger. He comes in, he says, "I'll be back." The famous line, and he goes, "In 15 minutes." Like you knew that there was going to be a joke out of there. Then they had the lesbian character, and they devoted a lot of time to her and her, and even her insults weren't as fresh and funny as they were the season before. It's like they tried so hard that they just ruined it. The storyline was okay, and it just and I can see why Netflix canceled it. It was not good. It just totally missed the mark. You had lightning in a bottle. You had a great. They should have just kept it going, and whatever they did, they hit a brick wall, changed the format, and just tried so hard to make it something it wasn't. And I'm not sorry that the show got canceled, because after watching this season, I'm like, it deserved to be canceled. I had high hopes for it. I think the same thing happened with The Night Agent that got canceled. The second season, horrible. Storyline, horrible. Just, these shows have a great first season, and then it's like they forget what they did. Like, just don't change anything. Do the same thing. Just like you didn't stop. Just, write a second season. Just go right into a second season. And if they cancel it, okay, But it's like they stop, and then they come back, and they try to tinker with stuff. And, when you start tinkering with the recipe, we all know what happens. Most of the time, it doesn't turn out well. And this was just, it was awful. It was a shame, because the premise was good. And even Tom Arnold, the scenes that had Tom in there were horrible. Like, it's like, they have such good chemistry, him and Schwarzenegger from the movie. And they had very few scenes together. And it was just like, and then the scenes they were in together, it was just awkward. I don't know. And it's a shame, because, they had so much potential and didn't reach it. And I think, do you watch the show The Boys?
Yeah.
Tell me your thoughts on the seasons 2, 3, and 4.
I remember too well. It's been a while.
Well, what do you? I mean, do you think the show got better or got worse? I'll leave it.
I feel like overall, I would say it got worse for me. There definitely were certain character developments that were interesting, but overall, I think it did decline from where it began.
Yeah.
And part of that, I think, might have been because they just expanded to so many characters, expanded the world of the show.
It lost its way, and it got political.
Yeah.
Yes, the creator is anti-Trump. Okay, whatever. Whatever. But when you start infusing your personal politics into the writing of your show, you're going to alienate half of your audience. You are. That's why it goes back to my original. We talked about politics doesn't belong in entertainment. But whatever side of the aisle you come down on, people want to escape the reality of the politics of today. They don't want to see it on the screen. But anyway, but the storylines, and like you said, the characters and the development, and it lost its charm. It lost what made it good. Even Carl Urban's use of the C word and how many times and variations he could say it couldn't save the show. It was just like, it just wasn't. I don't want to say it jumped the shark, but it kind of did. It just wasn't believable, right? You had,
you try this. They used too heavily of what made the show so special in the first season and most of the second season. They just tried to incorporate that, and they just used it too heavily, and it lost what made it special.
Yeah. Totally agree, and that's another example of shows that started off great and then just went off nosedive off a cliff, and I'm like, Now will I watch the last season? Yeah, But like now, I'll watch it, but I'll be doing something else at the same time, right? Maybe I'll be on my phone messing around on social media. Maybe I'll be cleaning the house or doing the laundry or, you know, talking on the phone or whatever, and it's noise in the background. The first season, I'm locked in. No distractions. Now, I don't care because, I want to see how the show ends. This is the last season. I've invested so much time, but I'm like, whatever. I don't need to really be focused because the show really, I've lost interest in it. Sad to say.
No, I get that. What did you watch Stranger Things?
No, I haven't watched it. Not, for me, when I was a kid, yeah, I watched shows about kids, Saved by the Bell, Kids Incorporated, yeah. As an adult, I don't like watching shows with kids. I just don't. Not interested. And I know it's a lot of '80s stuff, and it's great, but I don't, I don't like child actors. I just don't at this stage, and I just don't really want to watch kids. I want to watch adults, and I know the show's gotten good reviews, but I don't know if it's if it lost its way or not. I've heard rumblings that it kind of did, but you could.
I think it's similar to The Boys. I don't think it. Personally, I feel like it didn't suffer as much as The Boys, but it definitely, as they expanded and everything going deeper into the show, it definitely.
I mean, I love the premise, all things '80s, and there was it spurred this resurgence in, the '80s IP, which was great. But again, I don't, and now, all these actors and actresses, they're, I don't know. I just, for me, children, let them be kids. Why, you want to have them on for, for an episode or one or two, small part, fine. But I feel like when you have shows around kids, I mean, yeah, I get it. The Disney Channel is going to have a bunch of, but look how those kids turn out. And, it's the business, Hollywood is vicious, man. And, it'll suck your soul right out of you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure not all, it doesn't happen to every child actor, and but I'm sure if you read interviews or listen to interviews and read the books from these kids, and the horrors and the stories that they went through, it's rough. So, like, my opinion is, let them be kids. Focus your attention. You got adults. You got thousands of late teens to early to teenagers, 18 and older, who want to be actors. There's a plethora of people who want to be actors. Go find somebody in that pool, and and because a lot of those, you get a lot of 20-year-olds playing teenagers. So in essence, you don't really a lot of times those child actors are a lot older than you think. Now, I heard today, I was reading an article that, did you watch Saved by the Bell? Are you familiar with Saved by the Bell? So Mark Paul Gosselaar got Dustin Diamond hired as Screech, and I think they were filming this. It was like the first episode or the second episode, and Peter Engel, the guy who created it and was in charge, he's like, he's really young. He's like, yeah, he's like 11 or 12 years old. And he had no idea. He misread the kid's age. Thought he was older. He's like, if I had known that, I never would have hired him. And then look what happened to him. Unfortunately, after the show was done, his life was never the same. He turned to drugs and porn and ended up dying. Which was,
Did you watch the I think it was on Max. It was like the documentary, like behind the scenes with the kid actors from like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, it was.
So like going back to like remakes and stuff. I don't know if you heard about they remade War of the Worlds
War of the
on
World. Yeah, I did
Amazon
hear
with
they're
Ice Cube,
remaking of that.
and it got like a 0 on Rotten Tomatoes. But just going back to the point of like remaking content that was very good and popular,
I
and
mean,
then if you're gonna
yeah,
remake something like that, just
my
dropping the
opinion
ball.
hasn't changed. Stop remaking good movies
Yeah,
because the remakes suck. Footloose, you didn't need to remake Footloose.
yeah,
The remake sucked. Roadhouse, you didn't need to remake that movie. Why, you're gonna tarnish Patrick Swayze's legacy? Like they wanted to do Dirty Dancing. I don't know if they did or not. I think they did a
I think
Dirty
they did,
Dancing
yeah, in
too.
like the early 2010s.
Bum, now they're filming The Devil Wears Prada too. Okay, stop. Going back to sequels, but the remakes, remake the movies that sucked. There's tons of movies in the 80s and the 90s, the 70s even, and even the 2000s that were horrible. If you're going to remake that movie, remake one that wasn't good and make it better.
Yeah,
Don't touch movies that don't need to be touched. Back to the Future. They want to make a remake so bad, and thank God those guys said absolutely
I
not.
know Robert Zemeckis was like
Bob
Michael
Gale and
J.
Robert
Fox
Zemeckis.
can't do acting again because of everything going on with him. So like
Yeah.
without him, he's
Oh
not
yeah,
gonna.
no, and even when they asked him years ago. He says, "No, there's no reason to. It's done. It's over. We told our story. We're not telling anymore." And I'm okay with that. The but there are so many movies out there that just missed the mark. Now they're remaking He-Man. Okay, yeah, the original He-Man in 1987 was horrible. I'm not gonna lie, it was horrible. I have high hopes, but then when you cast Jared Leto as Skeletor, I don't have high hopes. I mean, come on, that's not Skeletor. Skeletor is an overpowering, huge nemesis that could go toe to toe with He-Man. Not a skinny twig that he could blow over with a stiff wind. I'm like, so miscast. He wasn't good as the Joker in Suicide Squad. I'm not a fan of his acting. I'm sure he's got a huge following, and I'm sure in other stuff he's okay. I don't know. I don't really watch the stuff he's in because in the few things that I've seen him, I'm just not a fan. But why would you cast him? Like, you need like an actor. I don't know. I don't understand it. That's gonna ruin the movie for me because I can't visually see him as Skeletor. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And I know if he's looking like that, he's in a muscle suit, and it's going to look ridiculous because he's not built. And he's not going to be able to gain 200 pounds of muscle. This is not going to happen. But I am excited though that Henry Cavill is attached to the Voltron movie
yeah, I'm excited for that.
and Highlander. Again, going back to remakes and sequels. Highlander was great. I don't know why you need to touch it, but all right. So they got Henry Cavill. I don't know who they picked to play Sean Connery's role in it, but I don't know. I just think, come on, really? I don't know. It's disheartening that they keep remaking these classic movies and they do a shoddy job. It's horrible. When you have so much material out there that was horrible that you could make better. And if you make a bad movie and it's worse, all right, no harm, no foul, right? What do you got to lose? The first one was bad, so you got a pretty good shot that this one could be better. And if it's not, all right, then, the viewing public isn't any worse off. But yeah, I don't understand why they have to continually desecrate these great movies and come out with these remakes that are just they're horrible. I mean, there's like no thought, no nothing. I don't understand. Remake the stuff that didn't work, or
I think
like I said
Hollywood
before,
just
huh?
lost their creativity. They're rushing out these projects.
Yeah,
That's also adding to it.
it all comes down to the money. You know,
Yeah.
studios don't want to invest in original scripts. They want something that they know people are going to sink their teeth into. But if you're going to do it right. Take the time. You know, stick to the source material and don't try to recreate it. Continue it. Don't recreate those movies. Continue them. Tell me where they're at now. Where are these characters now? Because you can't recreate these characters. You're just not going to be able to do it. You know, it's not James Bond. Yes, James Bond. You can have a new James Bond. That character will live on for infinity, right? It doesn't matter. Yeah, some of them, as long as you get a good actor that's going to play them. Well, I didn't think Daniel Craig was a great choice. I wasn't a fan of his Bonds. I wasn't a fan of. I liked Pierce Brosnan, but I didn't like the movies because the movies focused too much on the explosions and the stunts, and not the dialogue. You go back to the originals with Sean Connery, even Roger Moore. They were more grounded, right? Yeah, there were some exciting chases and some gadgets and some action, but it was the character. It was character driven, right? It was all about him. And now, then it was just like, how can we get bigger and better and explode more stuff? And yeah, they just, I think they lost sight of what what the movie is about. And it'll be interesting to see because now the Broccoli's don't have any creative control over it. Amazon does. So I could see James Bond showing up in a Prime vest and delivering packages. I don't know. But again, it goes back to there's so much. If you're gonna make a movie that was good, continue it. Not necessarily a sequel, but it's not a sequel. It's a new It's not even a new version. It's just a continuation of those characters. Yes, they have kids, or maybe they don't have kids. Maybe they have relatives. We don't know. Where are they now? Kind of, and continue those stories. Maybe a villain had a kid and didn't know, and the classic. Oh, my dad was a supervillain. Now I'm going to avenge his death. Yada yada. And now I can't do it to the people that originally did it because they're not here, or I'm going to go after somebody. It's this story that's been told a million times in Hollywood, but you can do it with these characters, right? And they can resemble the original. They can have some of those original character traits, and you can introduce new characters or whatever. So I don't know. I mean, like for Spaceballs 2, you're not going to have John Candy's character. How are you going to have, you can't have the Mog, What are you going to say, that they had a long lost brother or something? All right, maybe they do, Okay, maybe it's believable, maybe it's not. You're not going to have Joan Rivers' robot. You're going to get to, that robot, there's going to be some iteration of it, right? Spaceballs 2, you're going to have to continue the story. Where are these characters? Where is Lord Helmet? Or are you going to introduce an entirely new set of characters? And what are you going to spoof? That's the key, right? Plenty of material. You got a ton of Star Wars movies to spoof. Probably a couple of Alien movies to spoof. There were, the new Aliens that came out. Probably Interstellar, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
What other movies, what other space movies are they going to, I don't know. But I will tell you one movie, there's a hidden gem in the 80s that I would love to see a sequel to. I don't know if you probably never heard of it or saw it, but there was a movie called Spaced Invaders. And it was this,
I never heard of it.
and I'll never forget there was this one line where there was like these 4 or 5 little aliens, and they were coming to try to conquer Earth, and the one alien used to say, "Die, Earth scum," and then every time he would encounter a human, he would zap him with the ray and say, "Die, Earth scum." And the one, and I just remember the one scene, they're like, "Die, Earth scum." That's all you ever say is "Die, Earth scum, die, Earth scum." They're gonna put it on your tombstone, "Die, Earth scum." And as a kid, it was the funniest thing ever. I couldn't tell you the rest of the plot of the movie. That was the only thing I remember. It was a great line. "Die, Earth scum." Like, all right, pick up a sequel to that. Make something, funny, silly, stupid. There you go. I mean, there's so many gems, like just from. You could write a whole movie about that. Whether it would be made or not is another story. But again, it's all about getting the money to make these films.
Yeah. Like with Star Wars, I know like a big franchise like that. I don't know if you watched the Skeleton Crew show that came out
The what?
last year, earlier this year. Skeleton Crew for Star Wars.
Yeah, I haven't watched. The last Star Wars show I watched was The Mandalorian, and then the spinoff of The Mandalorian I tried to watch. I probably watched a few episodes of whatever that one was. Wasn't very good. And then Ashtar, whatever, I didn't watch that one. They weren't good.
Well, the thing I did like was Skeleton Crew, and before it came out, it had a lot of like negative responses for this, because like in the trailers, it didn't look like your typical like Star Wars show. But what I think what it did right compared to like the sequel trilogy, which a lot of people don't like because it had too much of a feel like with the original trilogy that George Lucas made in the 70s and 80s. With Skeleton Crew, it didn't really feel like Star Wars,
Okay.
but it definitely had elements of Star Wars in it. But it was completely separate, no connections really to like other Star Wars material, and it shows that in a franchise as big as Star Wars, there's so much potential in places you can go in like infinite galaxy of the worlds that we haven't
Right.
discovered yet. And I think that was something positive for the show. So stuff like that I think is good. And it shows that there is the potential, even if you do continue these big franchises like Star Wars, Star Trek, whatever the franchises are, there's definitely still that potential to still expand it and have something new to it.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. Um, and speaking on Star Wars, I was watching an interview with George Lucas about why he sold the company, or and and you could tell they asked him about the other 3 movies, and you could tell the disappointment in how they came out. That was not his vision at all, to how that story should have ended. And in my opinion and then you shouldn't have sold the company. Sell it after you make those 3 films, and then listen, somebody's always going to be there to buy it. $6 billion at the time, you could have probably made another billion with the 3 other films had you stayed. Kathleen Kennedy just ruined the entire Lucas catalog. She ruined Indiana Jones. She ruined the Star Wars. She's horrible. Yeah, not good. I mean, she's produced a lot of Steven Spielberg films, but when she ran that company, all those flops were under her. You can point the finger right to her. But those last 3 Star Wars films were horrible. True fans, people loved 4, 5, and 6, right, with Star Wars. Then they were chomping at the bit for the first 3, and the first 3 come out, and they were not good. Most Star Wars fans will tell you they were not good. The first one, Episode 1, was a snooze fest. There was nothing in it. It was all character development, foundation. I was like, we want to see spaceships blow up and fights and saber. There was none of that. And then you got a little bit of it in the second, and then, obviously more in the third. And the backlash that Lucas got from the fans was, I think, too much for him to really handle, and that's one of the driving factors of why he sold the company. He's like, you guys didn't like what I did for the first three. Why am I going to finish it? Well, it's your baby. Finish it. People don't have to like it. It's your story, right? You struck gold with 4, 5, and 6. It was groundbreaking. Now you are telling people how we got to 4, 5, and 6, and it's not what people think. What your vision is not what the masses think it should be, right? People are like, it was confusing. Nobody understood it. It was just very convoluted. They wanted a simple story. He gave them so much stuff, and then, Jar Jar Binks, and, come on, you created these characters, and it was an amalgamation of just him getting his story out, and the fans just weren't buying it. And then you get the last three, which, 7 was just a total. J.J. Abrams just did a total knockoff of the first one, shot for shot, scene for scene. It was a remake of the original. And then the second one was so bad that director wasn't allowed to come back for the third one, right? When he killed, I don't remember which one where Hamill dies. And the way he died was just so pathetic. And they ruined the franchise. And people, I think, they're looking for something, right? They want that fresh, new Star Wars, like from the 70s. And then Rogue One comes out. I thought Rogue One was fine. I had no issues with it. I thought it was an enjoyable movie. But there was so much backlash from that, and then they're attacking certain characters because it was stupid, and then you have The Mandalorian. Great. Baby Gru, whatever, the baby Yoda, right? Phenomenal. So yes, you can, I would love to see maybe them focus on Chewbacca. How did Chewbacca? Let's do something on him, or the Ewoks, right? Oh, you have characters that were created. Even Boba Fett. That was the other one. That show was so. But he created so many different characters that you could totally do a spinoff on any one of them, right? Do a they brought in Jabba the Hutt. Do something about him, or Admiral Akbar, right? The characters that the fans loved. You could find one or two of them, and they did it. They were successful with The Mandalorian. They were semi-successful with Boba Fett. I seriously think you could probably be successful again, focusing on one of the main characters that we haven't seen. But again, it comes back to creativity and what Bob Iger said. We want to make great movies. It's not about sequels and this. I call bull on that, because if you wanted to make great movies, you would actually make a great movie, or find an original movie, instead of making sequel after sequel after sequel of Marvel or Star Wars. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But just my humble opinion.
I agree. Before we wrap up, back to the Naked Gun. I don't know if you saw what's it called? Brightburn. It came out in 2015, I think.
Which one?
Brightburn. James Gunn wrote and directed it. It's kind of like an evil spin-off of Superman.
Nope, never saw it. I wasn't a big James Gunn fan.
He landed on Earth, and then he wasn't taken in by the Kents. He was taken by a different family, but negative things happen while he's growing up, so he becomes an evil version of Superman and ends up killing everyone. But
no, I never saw that one.
It did very poorly theatrically.
See why?
And it was, I think critically it didn't do terrible, but I thought I liked it because it's a version of such an iconic character that is like completely opposite and kind of, I don't know if it was an original like take on the character that James Gunn created, or if it's something from like an alternate comic universe that I don't know. I
Yeah, I
haven't
don't
really
know.
read a lot of comics, but just the fact that it's based on such an iconic character, but a version we've never really seen before, I thought was a nice fresh take on it, even though it wasn't that successful. Um,
Yeah, I mean, and a perfect example of making a movie, remake that. Introduce a new take on a character like that, but you got to be careful because a movie like that is it's going to be hit or miss, right? Either people are going to embrace it or they're going to be repulsed by it. And you got to be very careful when you take an iconic character and turn him heel. When people grow up, he's a hero. Now you're making him a villain. You're going to face backlash. You're automatically going to face backlash because, that's my childhood you're messing with. Superman's not a bad guy. He's a good guy. So you can do it. You can start him out good, and then you can show us how he turns bad, and end the movie with him bad, and then now you got hopes for a sequel or to continue the story. But if you start him off bad without telling us why, and this is all, you're going to lose
well, in
people.
that film, well, the whole movie he was a kid. We never saw him as an adult. But he did start out good, and what turned him bad was that in like elementary school or middle school, he had like a crush on a girl, and I don't remember exactly what happened, but stuff happened, and she ended up, making fun of him, and different events led to him becoming bad and like killing his adopted parents and the girl and everyone. So we kind of saw the development, I think.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, I'm all for different takes, but I think we need a break from the superhero movies.
Yeah.
I think we've become oversaturated with them, and they're not good. You know, you got to take the time to really do the movie right. And I'll give Ryan Reynolds credit. He did that with Deadpool. All three Deadpools were enjoyable, right? The first one was a smash. The second one was good, not as good as the first one. The third one was better than the second one. He did it. He took his time. He did it right. And he's not in a rush to make another one. If there's a good story and he can do it, great. And if Hugh Jackman comes back as Wolverine, I'm sure he'll do it again. But lay off the superhero movies. Find something else. There's a ton of material out there. Make new material. Create something new. Give us something we haven't seen before. Because all these movies that are coming out are just regurgitations of what's already been done. Yes, people love that. People want it. But there's a lot of people who want something new. And you're not seeing people flock to the movie theaters. Yes, people will flock to see Tom Cruise in Top Gun because it took 40 years for the sequel to be made. And that was more of a continuation, right? It was a continuation of the story. It wasn't a remake of the Top Gun. He did it right. And now it was so successful, he's going to make another one. Pirates of the Caribbean, continue that story. Those movies were great. But you got to bring back Johnny Depp. If you're going to introduce somebody else and make it, it's not going to be the same. You're not going to have, you can't do a Pirates of the Caribbean movie without Johnny Depp as Captain Jack Sparrow. It's not going to work. People are not going to buy it. They're not. That's what, when you think Pirates of the Caribbean, what do you think of? Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
So for Disney to make a movie without him and call it Pirates of the Caribbean, it's going to fail. It's just going to fail. And stop making live remakes of your animated features. They are awful. Just stop. Snow White, horrible. Not to mention that, with all the drama surrounding it, but just stop. Leave the cartoon classics alone. You don't need to remake that movie. It's not bothering anybody. Anyway, we save that discussion for next time. We'll go down that rabbit
One
hole.
thing I am kind of looking forward to for Disney before we wrap up, they did say like they are planning to go back to like doing original like hand drawn cartoons, which I'm excited about.
Yes,
So
I would
hopefully,
love that because it's
hopefully
all,
that ends up happening and is good.
which I don't know because they do everything on computer now, and you know, I think The Little Mermaid was the last movie that they did completely by hand. And then the ones after that, they were using computer animation. I think Aladdin was a combination of both. Yeah, but you know, all the bubbles were drawn by hand, thousands, millions of bubbles. You know, and that's what made those movies so good. The animation was clean. It was, you know, yeah. And then, you know, now it's all computer generated and it looks like crap. It does. You know, nothing beats the original. And yeah, it's going to take you 3 years to make that movie as long as you do it right, you know?
So you're right, take the time, and I think if
Yeah.
people know how much work actually went into making it, at least for me, that kind of definitely impacts
Yeah.
my decision of if I'm gonna want to see it.
Oh, absolutely. You're appreciative of it because you're in
Yeah.
awe when you go and see a movie like that on the big screen, knowing that it was drawn by hand. And, you know, for one scene in the movie that could be, you know, 30 seconds could take months just to complete that one scene, you know, with everything that's going on. And, you know, to see the characters and the backgrounds and, you know, Warner Brothers when they did their Looney Tunes cartoons, you know, phenomenal. And then I saw new versions, and I'm like, oh my god, no, I'm like, turn it off. It's ugh. How can you call that Looney Tunes? No, you're desecrating the original. You know, Chuck Jones is turning over in his grave seeing that stuff. You, when you outsource it to the computers, you take away the human connection to it. Like you said, knowing the amount of work and effort that goes in. I look at it and next. I'm not even gonna waste my time. But if I know it's a hand drawn cartoon, I'll stop and watch because I'm like, that's awesome.
So Naked Gun, I'm gonna rate it, and I haven't seen it yet, but out of a four, I'd probably give it like a two. Mostly because it's not really my like type of comedy per se.
Hmm. Yeah, it
I did on the positive side. I did like some of the performances. I can't say like I can't compare them to the originals since I haven't seen the originals, but I did like them. And the story it was fun to watch. I enjoyed it. It entertained me. Um, it definitely it had both positive and negatives going for it. I
right.
would say.
Well, if you get a chance, you should watch the original Naked Gun. You can find it online, I'm sure. It is, you know, it's hysterical. Um, have you ever seen the movie Airplane?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. If you like the movie Airplane,
That's
you'll love Naked Gun. You know, even O.J. Simpson, you know, he's in it, but you know, back then, you know, nobody knew, you know, who was going to turn out to be. Um, but it was funny. The original Naked Gun was funny, and you're gonna have to watch it a couple of times to pick up everything, because you'll miss stuff, and you know, the sight gags in and of itself. And yeah, do yourself a favor, watch it, and then compare it to the one that you saw, and be like, then I think you'd be like, yeah, 2 stars was generous.
Yeah. Cool. Before we go, did you get a chance to watch Superman since the last time we talked?
I have not had a chance yet. Hoping maybe next weekend if I can, but I'll probably not. But I'm probably going to try and see Jurassic Park. I think I'm going to wait for Superman to come out on the streaming. I'll go see Jurassic Park in the theater only because I think you want to be able to see dinosaurs on the big screen to get that
Yeah.
experience. Um, so yeah, I'm going to see if I can see that in IMAX. I'm going away, but when I get back, hopefully I'll be able to see it. So we'll see. I'll let you know.
Nice.
All right.
Next time we talk, definitely like to hear your thoughts on those movies. So,
Yep.
thanks for hopping on today, and
Yep.
we will see you all next time.
Take care, guys.
Everyone, thank you for watching today's episode. If you like this episode, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And follow us on social media. Twitter, we're at Cinema Safari 25. Instagram at Cinema Safari Podcast. Comment, check our posts out. Also, comment on the videos. We'd love to see your comments. We'll reply to the comments, read all the comments. If you have any suggestions for future episodes or want to comment, give feedback on material that you saw in this episode or any of our previous episodes, please leave it, and we will see you all next time. Thank you so much for your support.